when I was in 2016, that was the year I did not believe that God was real anymore. And I lost my childhood best friend to cancer. He was on his last round of chemo. He was almost healed. And then he dies. And so now I'm left with even more questions than before. I'm already experiencing, so much church hurt and confusion, and my family's walking through a lot. And now, I'm like, well, why would God take somebody away from me? All of this plays into the picture because at this point, I'm now willingly choosing to, sleep with whoever, drink whenever I want. The pornography addiction isn't even a problem to me because it's like, well, none of this is real, none of this is good. Like, if this is what church is and the way it hurt me, and if this is who God is and the way I feel betrayed by him, like I feel like he turned his back on me, then why would I want to follow him anyways? So why not do my own thing?
Welcome back to Season 2 of the Dare to Love podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Holloway, and you are listening to Beauty from Ashes, where I have guests on to share how God brought them out of terrible situations and turned it into something beautiful. So my guest today is my good friend, Jordan Torres. I've known for several years. She's going to be sharing her testimony on how God brought her out of a pornography addiction. So I hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so Jordan, just tell me a little bit about how you grew up, your childhood, what all that was like for you.
So I'm the oldest of 3, and I grew up in a pastor's family literally since the womb. Like, that's the only life I ever knew. I grew up in church. My dad was, at the time, a youth and children's pastor, and so my first youth trip was 6 weeks old. So I grew up knowing nothing but God my whole life. I have 2 younger sisters, and we all 3 just kind of grew up in that life. My mom was diagnosed with MS when I was 5 years old. So that is an autoimmune disease that changed our family's life a lot because she was really sick and not always able to do everything she wanted to do. She was a stay-at-home mom, which that was to our benefit. We had a lot of love from both of our parents, but life was very busy and hectic. Always doing something with church, always doing something in ministry. And so I always knew who God was, and I think I got saved 15 times, growing up, because I knew God. I thought I understood who God was, but I had a very shallow understanding of God, and that played all the way, honestly, until I was 22, this off and on understanding of who God was. And so my dad eventually became a pastor of a church. We planted a church when I was in 5th grade. And so from then until I was a junior in high school, that was our life, was a church plant life. And, we did everything because there was so few of us. Yeah. So I remember on a Friday night going to paint at our church because that was just what we knew. That was our entire life. And when I was a junior in high school, my dad burned out from being a pastor, and that was a really, really, really hard time for our family. He stepped away from that position, and he was still working full-time at his other job, but it was just a very chaotic and confusing time. Really, it took a toll on us for, I would say, close to 10 years. We're just now kind of seeing the other side of it, and it made church very hard and very confusing because now everything we've ever known was flipped upside down, and the way I knew God because of my parents was now flipped upside down because now we're wrestling with church and just different things. So it was very difficult for a while, and that was kind of the time that made me wonder if God was real and how good he was, if he was real. Basically from that point on until I was 22 when I actually truly encountered the love of God. And it sent me on a very long journey, a very rebellious journey of, if I've grown up under almost a spotlight in a sense, and everybody expected me to be a certain way, act a certain way, do things a certain way, and the pressure of just being a pastor's kid. And it made, me feel like, okay, well, if I can't live up to people's expectations of perfection, then I'm just going to do whatever I want, however I want, because I can't live up to it anyway, so I might as well live life my own way and prove to people, like, these standards that you set for me are not real, and I'm just going to do my own thing. So it really sent me on a journey where there's a lot of anger, a lot of confusion, a lot of just not knowing who I was, because my identity had always been a pastor's kid. I didn't know who I was outside of that. I didn't know who I was outside of what my family did and what we were known for. So that in itself was a journey. And being the oldest, there were different pressures, on me through the years that my sisters maybe didn't experience, because I had to, be there for my sisters.
Right,
and
you're the oldest.
Yeah. And so being in that position, and, I carried different weights at times, not necessarily anybody put on me but myself sometimes, but there was a lot of just figuring out who am I, and like what is God, what is life, like what is the purpose of all this.
Yeah. So like you talked about like how difficult that was for you, so I'm just curious, like you can just dive into like your addiction and like how all of that pressure of being a PK like played a part into that.
Yeah. So in 6th grade, I was introduced to porn by some girls at my school. I knew nothing about sex, knew nothing about really anything. My parents never had a sex talk with us, and they look back now and realize that, that was an area that they dropped the ball in. But I don't blame them for, anything that I went through or any of the mistakes I made. But in 6th grade is such a young age, 11 years old, but actually 11 years old is the average age that kids are introduced to pornography. And by the age of 15, 94% of children will have seen pornography somehow. And that's, as of this year, that's the new statistic. So that,
Yeah. Like 11 sounds young, but like you could get a Hulu account for $6 and watch porn on Hulu.
Yeah. It is just like mind-blowing that how many people, and at this point, like when I was in 6th grade, that was 2006, so the internet wasn't what it is today.
Yeah.
But it was, still a thing, and so I can't even imagine the pressures of kids today. But I wouldn't say that I really did much with it at the time when I was in 6th grade, just because I don't think I had a phone. I didn't have much computer access, so it wasn't right away that anything happened. But I would say somewhere in between middle school and high school, I started to get just more curious. I remembered that introduction, and that was my foundation of what I knew of sex. Like, because I hadn't really had a conversation, like understanding. I'd always been told, like, don't have sex till you're married, but I never knew why. I never knew, like, what would happen if you did. Like, I didn't know the cost of it. And at that time, like, I was saying, like, I will not have sex till I'm married. But then pornography comes into the picture, and now I'm confused. This is now my, like, foundation of what I know about sex. So somewhere in middle school, I mean, that's what kids talked about all the time. Sex, porn, anything like that. I learned everything I knew from school or the internet or porn. And so somewhere along the way, I started to just get into it a little bit more. And at that time, I still would not have said it was an addiction, because it wasn't. I just was confused and was just learning. I felt like I was
curious.
learning, curious. Like, okay, well, what is sex? Like, when things would get brought up, like, what is that? So it was an innocent introduction that was outside of my control, but it turned into something that was far from innocent. And by high school, for sure, it was starting to become an addiction. All through high school, that was a pretty consistent part of my life. But every single time I did it, it was, you feel so much shame and guilt, and you just feel dirty. So, like, I'm wrestling with who God is, but I also don't want to turn to God, because I feel like so much shame and guilt that I'm like, well, if God is real, like I can't come to him because now I have all this, this just you feel dirty. And so through high school and into college, that was like such a part of my life, and that played into, you know, my relationships. And I lost my virginity when I was 16 because that was, you know, it wasn't a big deal to me anymore. It was common. Everybody I knew was, you know, sleeping with their boyfriends and doing whatever they wanted to do. And I knew that, you know, I had been taught don't have sex till marriage, but it didn't seem to matter anymore. It felt like, well, nobody else is actually doing that. And even though it had these values, you know, I won't have sex till marriage, like it just went all out the window. And I know that porn really compromised that a lot. You know, it gave me a different lens and a different filter to see things through, a very distorted lens. And the guys that I dated on from high school and college, like they also had their own pornography addiction. So now you're bringing that into the mix too, and it's just negative influence everywhere. My relationships were very, very heavily like physically oriented, and all that we did was, you know, some revolving around sex. And so that's all I knew. Like I based what I thought love was around sex. Yeah. So now I've had sex, I've looked at porn, you know, now I'm starting to get introduced to alcohol and everything else. So now you throw all that into the mix, into a high school teenager who just doesn't know who they are. You don't really know who you are in high school. And so I'm just getting more and more confused. And I remember having a lot of anger through like middle school and high school. And just all the confusion, you know, I didn't know what was up or down anymore. Now it's turning into an addiction, but nobody at this time, porn was not talked about at all. Like it's still taboo, but it's becoming, you know, more normal to talk about it. But at that time, like I literally didn't know a soul who talked about it anywhere. Yeah. Other than like, you know, kids at school talking about it or something like that. But it was normalized. So there was nobody saying, oh, this is wrong. This is how you get help. This is affecting you negatively. Yeah, nothing like that. So you carry that into college, and I was involved with campus ministries, and I remember I went to UNC Charlotte for 2 years, a college in North Carolina, and I remember telling my small group finally one night, I think somebody else had maybe shared something similar, and I finally felt comfortable for the first time. And at this point, I'm easily at least 7 years into this, and I remember telling it for the first time, and I felt like a little bit of a weight off my shoulders, but it's not like it got fixed or healed in that moment. From there, I decided, why not share it with the world? I don't know why. I still don't know if that was the right thing to do, but it also opened the door. Like, I don't know if I would be public about it now if I hadn't done it then. I didn't have the answers at the time, but I'm thankful that I did share. I shared through a blog post, and all of a sudden I have all these girls coming to me. They also have a porn addiction, and how do they get help? But that's where I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how to get help. At this point, it's starting to be an off and on struggle because, you know, I am trying to figure out God. I'm trying to figure things out. So it's not all the time, but I just don't know the way out because there's not one person telling me, you know, here's how you get out. Like, you know, people tell you, like, pray for healing and pray for freedom and all this kind of stuff, and I would. Like, nobody wakes up one day and decides they want to have a porn addiction. Nobody just decides, today's the day I'm going to be addicted to something, whether it's porn, drugs, alcohol, whatever. Like, you don't start something wanting to be addicted to it. And nobody that has a porn addiction, even people in the world that don't know God, like, nobody wants to have it. There are so many people who have, like, famous people who have broken down on stage at concerts and all kinds of stuff that they just shared their addiction and wanted to get out of it but didn't know another way. So there's nobody that just wants to have this. So into college, I'm still wrestling with this. Now I have more and more girls coming to me, so I'm like, okay, well, clearly I'm not the only one. But nobody is still talking about this. Nobody's
been through it to tell you how to get
or if they've been through it, they're not speaking about it. because clearly if there's all these other people saying they have a problem, there were people that have been through it. It's just maybe there weren't many people on the other side of it that could even speak into it. Or if so, it's still just such a shameful topic.
Yeah.
It's hard to talk about. So I ended up dropping out of college after my second year, very confused on what I want to do, still just working through identity and who I am and what I want to do. I changed my major so many times. I was going to go to culinary school. I was going to go to Lee University. I was going to go to a community college in my hometown. Like, just anything I could think of at this point I wanted to do. And at this point, I'm genuinely trying to follow God, but like out of my own strength and trying to figure him out. And I started going to Forward Conference back when I was 16, I think. And I started to equate God to this emotionalism, because I would experience him in these moments of something like Forward or a different kind of conference, or, a big emotional church service, and I would be like, okay, this is it. I'm leaving it all behind. Like, I'm never going to have sex till marriage. I'm never going to look at porn again. And then I would get back and life would be normal, and there's no more of this like emotional moment. And now I'm right back into the same things because I don't know a different way. Like, I'm trying to figure out who God is. I'm trying to do it, but I'm not, like, I haven't confessed this to anybody. I mean, I did to my youth group, but it's like, okay, like you share it in a moment, and then it's like nobody really knows what to do with it or talks about it. So then you just kind of move on, and you're back into that same old cycle. So that carried on. I mean, every single year of my life through college, it was the same cycle. Like, I would, rededicate my life or get saved or whatever. And I was like still as broken as the last time, over and over and over again. At this point, I'm starting to just spiral again, and, alcohol's coming back into the picture. Dating a guy I shouldn't be dating, just making a lot of poor choices, didn't go back to college, just kind of doing nothing. So pornography addiction comes back, where it had been kind of up and down. It's kind of back into the picture pretty much full time. I also, am in the relationship I shouldn't be in, drinking, just nowhere am I making any sound or clear choices. And now I'm feeling depression and anxiety for the first time that I had never experienced in my life. I believe it was just the heaviness of all that I was in, because there was just so much weighing on me. But I, again, didn't know a way out. That season literally took me up until the day I met God, like until I turned 22, from I'd say 20 to 22, 19, something like that, was just the deepest spiral for me. When I was in 2016, that was the year I did not believe that God was real anymore. And I lost my childhood best friend to cancer. He was on his last round of chemo. He was almost healed. And then he dies. And so now I'm left with even more questions than before. I'm already experiencing, so much church hurt and confusion, and my family's walking through a lot. And now, I'm like, well, why would God take somebody away from me? All of this plays into the picture, because at this point, I'm now willingly choosing to, sleep with whoever, drink whenever I want. The pornography addiction isn't even a problem to me, because it's like, well, none of this is real. None of this is good. Like, if this is what church is and the way it hurt me, and if this is who God is and the way I feel betrayed by him, like I feel like he turned his back on me, then why would I want to follow him anyways? So why not do my own thing? And by the grace of God, I was working at Chick-fil-A at the time, which I was just making so many poor choices. But I had a manager at Chick-fil-A who really believed in me and really kept pushing me. He knew there was more for me. He knew the choices I was making, but he knew there was more for me. And I was at Forward in 2016 when I heard of Free Chapel College for the first time. Knew immediately. I mean, I've never heard God so clearly speak in my life. It was like a burning bush moment. Knew immediately I was supposed to go. Applied everything. Ran so hard. Like, pulled out my application last minute. and didn't come. And I continued to just spiral into this addiction, and now I'm like just blackout drunk on the weekends and making all these poor choices. And porn is like, I'm not even fazed by it at this point in life, because it's just a part of who I am. It's just a part of what I do. I don't know a way out. Don't know that I want a way out, because it feels like nothing. I've tried everything. I've tried God. I've tried ministry. I've tried the world, and it's just none of it's, filling me up. So I might as well do whatever I want until it was a week before I was going to come to Free Chapel College in 2017. I actually went back to the church that my dad had originally planted. It's, different now, but I hadn't been in such a long time to church in general, because I was just so hurt, so confused. And at that time, we were concerned that my youngest sister might have a brain tumor. That week we were going to find out. And my church didn't really do this, but we kind of had a moment at the end where they laid hands on people and were praying for healing. And they were praying for my sister. And I'm over here to the side crying and praying and all this stuff. And it had nothing to do with anything that was going on, but I encountered the love of God for the first time. And it changed my life forever. I can remember that moment like it was yesterday, because I had rode this wave of, this emotionalism and trying to figure out who God was. And I finally found him, and I didn't find him, he found me. And what I realized in that moment was he had been pursuing me all along. He had been going to those places that didn't belong, trying to rescue me, trying to get my attention. And even when I was ignoring him, even when I felt like he wasn't good and I wanted nothing to do with him, he kept pursuing me, kept chasing me down. And it was one moment that I genuinely encountered his love, and it changed my life forever. I'm marked by that. And so where I didn't know if God was real, all it took was me encountering his love. And I cannot question God for anything at this point in my life. I cannot. I have never seen him turn his back on me. Where I thought he was with me in those moments that my innocence was stolen, in those moments that I was so hurt and broken, in those moments at my lowest where I didn't even think he was real. He was right there with me. He was grieved in the moment for the things that happened to me, or the things that I was going through. He was brokenhearted over it with me. And he was, there the whole time trying to pursue me, trying to just draw me into him. And when I finally tasted his love, it changed me forever. It was 1 week before I moved to Free Chapel College. And I have literally never been the same because of it. He just radically transformed my life. And so many of those things, I would say I was starting to teeter into an alcohol addiction. And completely, instantly healed me in that moment. The sleeping around and just the guilt and the shame that I had carried for so many years at this point healed me in a moment. There were so many things, so much anger and bitterness and unforgiveness healed me in that moment. But there were still things that have been a work in progress that he has been healing me from that wasn't instant. And porn was one of those things that was not an instant healing. And I believe it's because he wanted me to trust him, to follow him in the process and to work it out with him, and to see him as my strength, because I lived most of my life that I was my own strength. I was my own God. I made so many idols out of things that was not him. And so some of it he had to work out in a process to work out who I am and my character. And it's very difficult when it's something that you want so badly to give up, but you don't know how. And so I continued to kind of wrestle with that for a while. When I first got to the college, at this point, it's definitely not consistent, but it's still anytime it would happen, when I would get triggered again and go back to it, I would still feel so much guilt and shame because I'm like, God, I'm trying so hard to follow you. I'm like doing everything I can to be obedient to you. I want to follow you. And I'm still struggling with this. And I started going to counseling pretty soon into being at Free Chapel College and talking to my counselor about it and working that out was a big step in my healing journey. It still was not instant, still was not right away. It's taken so much time, and I've found the more I can bring accountability into my life, the more freedom I'm going to get. Honestly, the biggest step I took that has helped so much was getting an app on my phone. It's called Accountable to You. Anybody that comes to me and talks to me about it, that's what I point them to. It put guardrails in place on my phone and in my life that made it much more difficult for me to seek it out in the first place. And if I do, it's going to tell, the people that I have on it, it's going to let them know what I'm looking at. And that holds you, you don't want people to know what you're looking at. So that has helped so much in the journey. But it's been so much of a process. What I've learned, though, is when I would fall, to get back up. And my kid says, though I fall, yet I will rise. And that's what I found is but in the past, I would, if I looked at porn, then I would do anything to avoid God, anything to run from him because I felt so dirty. But in the garden, when Adam and Eve sinned, God said, "Who told you you were naked?" And I believe that's kind of the same thing when it comes to the shame of our sins is who told you you were naked? All he's wanting us to do, he's not wanting us to hide ourselves from him. He sees that we're naked. He sees that we're, he's not surprised. He was there when it happened. He saw what we looked at or what we did or the choices we made. He's not surprised by it. And so I've learned if I can go to him instead of hiding from him, he is my freedom and he is my only way out. It says that Jesus will provide us a way out of temptation, but that way is through him. And if I'm hiding from him, I can't get help. I can't get freedom. I could even go to somebody else in my life and ask for accountability, but they're human. There's no way they can completely help me out of it. But God always can. And so in those moments where I feel tempted, in those moments where I feel weak, he is my only option. And when I choose not to turn to him, I'm choosing not to get the help he's offering me and choosing not to take his hand out of that moment of temptation. And I found porn it literally stole over a decade of my life. So where, in 6th grade, it's a very formative time in your life. You're going through puberty. You barely even enter puberty in 6th grade. You're barely not a kid anymore. And so for porn to have laid the foundation of my, it laid the foundation of my life, of my adult life, of my formative years, because it was at such a young age that I was introduced to it. So if it took that long to get there, it's going to take that long to work itself out of my brain, because the addiction to porn is, compared over and over again to one of, something like cocaine, where it's just so addictive that you can't get enough. It literally rewires the neurotransmitters in your brain. And so I've got to have grace with myself and be patient when thoughts come in or temptation comes in. That doesn't mean that I've sinned just because that happens. There is a way out, but I have to let God work it out. And I'm learning that it's a genuinely, you have to rewire your brain and renew your mind. When the Bible talks about renewing your mind, you literally have to turn off those old thoughts and replace it with something new. Mm-hmm. And that in itself has been a journey. Mm-hmm. Just learning how to let God take it. And I don't feel as much shame and guilt. He's healed me from so much of that. And the thing I've learned is Jesus died on the cross for our forgiveness. We don't have to ask for forgiveness. It's already there for us. But have we forgiven ourselves? We do have, repentance is very real, and we do need to turn from our old ways. But the forgiveness is already there. It's just, am I gonna embrace that forgiveness that Jesus already died for me? He died knowing the websites I would go to, the places I would be in, the things I would drink and smoke and do. He already knew all that. That's what he died for. Right. So it's up to me to receive that and to let him do that work in my life and let the cross do its work in my life. And he has poured out so much redemption and so much healing and so much freedom in my life that even though I don't have all the answers and I'm still, working out so much of it in my own life, like, I can't not share about what he's done.
Yeah. No, I just love your story and how you say, like, that you had this, like, one moment with God and everything kind of made sense. I feel like he gives us all that opportunity, like, numerous times.
Yeah.
But it's like until we finally get it, it's kind of like it sets in. Because I had a very similar moment to what you're talking about. I think a lot of people do, as far as, like, just realizing that life is not playing out the way I thought it would, and realizing that I have to have a savior in order, but I think it's, like, really interesting, like, pornography. I feel like it's probably like 99% of people have seen it or struggled with it, and the fact that it isn't talked about, I think, just plays a part into, like, the society that we live in, especially if you're in ministry. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like, it's, like, more, like, you feel like a hypocrite.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with pornography in ministry, and so I think it's an awkward topic, like you said, but I also feel like it's very confusing because you're mixing curiosity and pleasure with shame and guilt.
Yeah.
So it's like the mixture of all of those emotions at one time can be so confusing, especially to a really young mind.
Yeah.
And I think just in society, like, I had a similar situation, that's all kids talked about. So it's like, okay, this is normal. Like, I don't know what this is, so I need to look it up to figure it out, so I know what they're talking about, so I fit in, So I think it can even start as innocent as that. It's just like, let me figure out what my friends are talking about, But I think it's just one of those unfortunate society norms that the church just has yet to work through and provide suitable content for people to really receive healing and freedom. So I think it's really amazing that you're speaking out on it, because especially as a woman, no, you don't hear women talk about porn at all. So and it's so, like, we all deal with it. We've all, like, I'm not saying we've all looked at it, but, like, a vast majority of us have and have struggled with it, just like Jordan. And so the fact that you're speaking out on it, I think, is great. So tell me about kind of, like, that process that God took you on, as far as, like, you're saying you're still working on it, it's still a process, but kind of, like, take me through the counseling, like, some other steps that you might have taken before you met Michael, when you met Michael, kind of all that.
Yeah. Counseling has been, I will tell if you are around me for more than 5 minutes, you'll probably hear me tell you to go to counseling, because God and counseling have changed my life. When I got to Free Chapel College, I just encountered God for the first time, and I was coming out of so much sin and rebellion and brokenness that I was willing to just give him everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I did, just in regards to my past, I cut off all soul ties. I, blocked numbers that I needed to block. I cut people off that I needed to cut off, especially, guys in my life that did not deserve that place. That was such a big step in, cutting off those old ways. And then I also gave God a year of singleness. So I didn't have any intentions with that year. I didn't, wasn't like, okay, at the end of this year, I'm going to get my husband, or anything like that. I just, with everything in me, wanted to be obedient to God, because he had so changed me. And I had, like tasted his love and, like, known his goodness for the first time, that I was willing to just do anything I could do. I remember it was, like, right before the school year started at Free Chapel College. I was like, I drove to Free Chapel, and I just sat in the parking lot and cried, because I was like, what am I doing? I just followed a God I barely know to a state I know nobody, and I'm, what on earth did I get myself into? And I remember I had my journal with me, and I wrote over and over and over, surrender. Like, so many times, just surrender, surrender, surrender. And I just surrendered everything I could to him. Everything of my past, including porn, including alcohol, including, guys and sex and everything. And that doesn't mean temptation didn't come.
Right.
I remember I think I said this, I preached in chapel that first year, and I was like, I have to, like, run by the alcohol aisle because I just cannot, like, I'm not at a place that I can't be tempted by it. I was pretty strict in the boundaries I put in my life that year. I didn't listen to a lot of secular music at that time because all that stuff just influenced me. I was very careful with what I watched, very careful with just everything. I put pretty strict rules in. I had a couple of friends that I was very open about everything with porn and just anything else I was going through. And we really held each other accountable in that area, and it helped me so much. It didn't mean I got it right or, I wasn't messing up, but I was trying my best, doing everything I could, and, talking through things with my counselor. And it wasn't always necessarily about porn, but it was things that affected, where I was in that, or even just the rebellion I went through that made me want to keep doing it after it was already introduced to me. And so just healing my heart and healing my mind was such a big process that she took me through. She'd always give me resources, and there was so much intense healing that went on for a couple years because there was just so much damage that I had done that had been done to me, a little bit of everything that I had to work through, that I had to surrender to the process. So, I had to choose to submit to God in that. I had to choose to, say yes to God in that journey, because God is a gentleman. He's not going to force you into healing. He's not going to force you into the next step that he's calling you into, but he also can't take you further until you say yes to that. And so, as scary as it was, I just said yes to the healing. I said yes to the obedience, and my year looked a lot different than some of my peers because I was so strict about what I did and who I was around and everything. I just put so many guardrails in my life. And Michael, my now husband, he had been in my life that whole time. But when I say I was not, I also was a very independent woman. I didn't care, even though I'd had this past. I was at this place where I was like, no, it's just me and God. I'm very content with that. I love where I am. I love following God, and I didn't want to do anything that would take away from that, because I encountered so much intimacy with God that year. I read my Bible consistently. I was learning so much about prayer and fasting and different aspects of following God that I didn't know a lot about. And so I was trying my best to start implementing those things in my life. And it was just genuinely the sweetest year of my life, because there was so much goodness, so much healing, so much redemption. It was just me and God. I had wonderful friends, wonderful family, but I was only concerned about him at that time. And at the end of that year, God did open my eyes to Michael, who had been there the whole time. And that we started, dating, and I can share about that too. But there was no distractions. It wasn't I was okay, but who might my future husband be? Or oh, God told me this, or God said that, or, I also had to give up my dream. I came to Free Chapel College feeling called to speak and to preach and to do all these things. And, but I had my idea of what I wanted. And I had, I'm going to be on this stage and do this and do that. And I had to go through a process of laying all that down. I let God kind of crush the dreams in my life because they were mine and not his. And so there was a lot of crushing, a lot of him working out character issues in me, and, things that just weren't of him. And the biggest thing I did, it wasn't oh, I did this or that. I just surrendered to him into the process and let him, take me on that journey. And that's what I still do, is I surrendered to him into the process. And it didn't look pretty a lot of the times. My second year of the college was so much, there's so much I walked through that year, and a lot of crushing, a lot of him working things out in me. But because I believe he brought so much healing into my life. All I did was say yes to God. He did the rest. But he carried me so far. And what I've learned is, when I'm not disciplined in other areas of my life, why would I suddenly be disciplined in saying no to temptation? So if I'm not disciplined in time management or in my health journey or, in my friendships and things like that and my work, if I'm not disciplined anywhere else, I'm not going to be able to say no when temptation comes, because I'm not saying no over here either. I'm not saying no to, the things I want or crave or whatever. I'm just saying yes. So, of course, I'm going to say yes to the, sexual desires that I crave or the alcohol that I crave or whatever, because it's just right there.
Mm-hmm.
So I've learned discipline is such a big aspect of, keeping temptation, being able to say no to temptation, because temptation is going to come. I don't know that there will ever be a time in my life that I don't struggle with that, because that's just the area that I'm weakest in. So God could heal me and I could never struggle with that again. But I'm also aware that I have to keep my guardrails up and I have to keep boundaries in place for the rest of my life, because if not, I'm giving the enemy room to come in and to steal, kill, and destroy. It's not all up to me, but if I'm not doing anything to put boundaries or guardrails in, then I can't expect God to get me out of the mess that I got myself in. He will, but if I'm just saying yes to whatever, I'm going to be I'm like an open target to the enemy, so easily brought down. And so I do have strict, guardrails on my phone, in my life, things that just keep me in place. And I believe accountability is a huge aspect to that. It doesn't mean you go around telling everybody, but you need to have one or two people that you can really trust. And I would say, too, it's important to have somebody that maybe didn't struggle with porn in your life to talk to, because you need somebody that's also not going to be tempted by what you're telling them. You don't need to, it's okay to have people that you do talk to that have been through a similar thing, but having somebody in your life that hasn't been, that's not their struggle, then they're not going to be triggered by the things that you're saying, or you're trying to, you're not bringing each other down in that. I think that's helpful, too.
Yeah. So tell me about, your marriage to Michael and, kind of how all that played into, how, your life and, your view on, sex now and, all of that.
So, after that year of singleness, or towards the end of that year, genuinely was not looking for anybody. Was so content. I was actually at a place that God more had to talk me into getting into a relationship, just because I was I had said over and over again, I'm not going to be with anybody else till my husband. I'm not going to date anybody else till my husband. And so I was nervous to get into another relationship and then say that and it not be true. And here I am again saying the same thing over and over like a broken record. And now those words don't have any meaning. But I think at a very similar time, God started to open our eyes to each other. We had been there all along, been in each other's lives for that last year, and I had seen his heart and his character, and it was as good up close as it was from a distance, and I knew he was who he really was. But we just, became friends, and through that friendship, God just started showing us we were on the same path. We wanted the same things that were we had so many conversations where it was just one thing after the other that we agreed with or we wanted for our lives. We were going in the same direction, which I think is important too. Not just to, find somebody that loves God, but that's going in the same direction. Because if he, felt like he was supposed to go to Africa and I felt like I was supposed to stay here and do things, it probably wouldn't have worked in the same way. So God just aligned so many things that were the same in our lives, and I had seen his love for God. I'd seen his servant's heart. I'd seen the way he was so willing to serve, and how hard he worked, and I'd seen his character, and so it was so much easier, through that summer, because my year of singleness didn't end until August, and we were firm on not breaking that and dating any sooner than that. So it was a summer of getting to know each other and just figuring things out. Is this worth it? Are we gonna go pursue this? Are we going to? Because we were both okay, if we do this, there's no ending it. There's no okay, it's not gonna work out. we wanted to be very sure before we dated that this was it. And so God used a lot of that time through that summer and even through our dating relationship the next 2 years just to heal so much of. Michael didn't heal me, but God used Michael as redemption in my life. And I always said, like, okay, well, I'll have to end up with somebody that has the same past as me, who slept around a lot and this and that, and like his past was so different than mine, like he had not been with anybody, he had not done anything, like he has his own journey with lust and porn, but that's his to tell. But so he did bring things in, but it wasn't the same past that I had. And I think that God did that on purpose. I think that he brought two very different paths together. It just is a depiction of God and his love, and his love for the church. And so God used that to show me that. God used Michael to show me that he is a God of redemption, that there is nothing that is too far gone or too dirty or too shameful to redeem. And the parts of me that were most broken were, the parts of me that had slept around or looked at porn and things like that. And that's a part of that he redeemed in relationship with Michael. And we definitely didn't get everything right, but he was the only person that I did not sleep with until the day we were married. And that was like, it was such a big deal to both of us, but there was never, like, while of course there was plenty of temptation, there was never ever a moment where I even questioned sleeping with him before marriage, because I valued him and I valued God in a way I never had in my life, where it was never a question that I would have done it in the past.
And I think he valued you more
absolutely.
than any other guy you've been with, too.
Absolutely, he did. And there are so many people, my sisters, my friends, say that Michael has set a standard for them and what they want in a husband. And it's not because he's perfect or, our relationship is perfect, but he genuinely, has always been a safe place for me. He has protected me. He protected, that part of me, and has, been such a safe place in that whole journey. He cares for me, loves me, and serves me, and is a depiction of what I would hope, girls would go for, is somebody like him. And, people say, oh, well, other guys like him don't exist, but they do. But sometimes it takes God opening your eyes to that. You're not always ready for it. I wouldn't have been ready for him. He wouldn't have been ready for me if we had, just decided, we get to the college and we just decided, oh, we're going to start dating each other. We didn't even have feelings for each other like that at that point. And I think that it can be the right person at the wrong time. So that was just genuinely God's timing, and the person that God set apart for me, and God used him to show me that somebody can respect you and honor you and love you and treat you as you deserve. He has far exceeded. He's just shown that God does exceedingly and abundantly more than we could ever ask or imagine. And our whole relationship and our marriage has, been, while there's things that obviously were not perfect and God's had to work out in us, like, he is the best person that God could have ever brought for me. And he has proved to me that there is just nothing that God won't do to write a new story for your life. And there's nothing God won't do to redeem you. And he's given me everything I have. I am undeserving of. The job I'm in, the ministry I do, my husband, my family, the things I've seen him redeem, and all of it, I'm so undeserving of. But it's just shown me that there's literally nothing we can do to earn God's grace or his love or his redemption. Like, it is all a gift. And I said in the beginning, like, Michael is a cherry on top of a great life with God, because Michael didn't complete me. He was the bonus to God completing me.
Yeah.
And so, because God had done so much in me and my identity and my intimacy with God, that I was like, now Michael's not coming in and I'm trying to, like, find my worth in him or trying to have him complete me. No, he is the best person for me, and he makes me better, and I'm better with him than I am without him. But he doesn't complete me. Like, that place only God can fill. And so I've been able to like enjoy Michael as a gift he is, because that's what he is, as a gift. And God has shown me that. Like, there's nobody, no story, no life that is past redemption or too far gone. Because if anybody would have been too far gone, I would have thought it was me. I would have thought there was no way out, no way to, a better life. And now I'm in a life that I couldn't have dreamed up 5 years ago. Like, 4 years ago at this time, I was still deep in sin. Just 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And God has completely redeemed my life and completely redeemed, what relationships are to me, what sex is to me, what love is to me. And while we've learned that, people say don't have sex until marriage, you don't know why, but we've learned in marriage that it is genuinely two souls becoming one, and everything you do and everything you are is coming into that. And so I wish I would have known that it's so fragile, and you're literally bonded for life with that person. Like, that's the point of it. And so I wish I would have known the deep weight that sex and marriage has, and that porn, I read a statistic that said porn teaches your brain to be more satisfied in porn than your spouse, because it's just so like fast paced, and you can that quick like moment of pleasure it gives you is so much deeper than any actual person could give you. And so
because it's fake.
Yeah, it's fake. And so even porn actresses said that their spouse or partner, they were more addicted to porn and wanted more of porn than they did their partner that was literally in porn. Like, so there's no end to what our minds will want from it if we keep going after it. And if I had known the damage it can do, and the way that like I'm having to let God rewire my brain, like it's so deeply damaging. And so literally rewiring of the brain to where, like, by the grace of God, He's, healed and redeemed so much, but it's still things that I'm having to work out that I wouldn't have had I never gotten so deep into it. And so we've learned just the gift that it is to wait on God and to wait on who He has for you and to wait until marriage. And if I could do it after all these years of so much sexual immorality, if I could be in an entire relationship with the man I love more than anybody I've ever loved and wait until our wedding night, like anybody can do it at any point. Like, you can stop at any point, only through God, but like you can turn towards God, repent, and go in a different direction at any time.
Yeah.
Because nobody is past redemption.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so inspiring to young girls out there, because porn is so demeaning to women, and like I said, it's fake. And there's a lot of we could probably talk for hours about the sex trafficking and like everything else that's like associated with the pornography industry. But to like hear you talk about your marriage to Michael and like your union with him is so different from what you see in pornography. And I think when you're young and you're watching porn, you think that's love. Mm-hmm. That's what sex is supposed to look like. Mm-hmm. And it's not at all it. And there's so many like other like things that happen during sex that don't happen. They edit it out of pornography and things like that. And so I think that's really inspiring to single women out there that are waiting, to single women or women out there that have gone through something so similar to you and feel like they're a lost cause. I think it's beautiful that God brought you. Obviously, Michael's not Jesus, but he brought you a visual like representation of purity and wholeness, and he brought that to you where you thought, well, I'll probably have to settle for somebody that went through something like me, because who would want this mess that went through this? Yeah. And then God's like, I do. And also, I'm going to send you somebody that does as well. So I think that's beautiful, and I just really admire your courage to share and inspire. I hope this inspires other leaders in the church that have gone through it to open up and talk about it. Male, female, young, old, we're all in this together, and we're all just trying to figure this all out. Nobody's perfect. And I also love what you said, last thing really quick. You said this earlier, but feeling like you couldn't go to God because you felt so dirty, and I love what you said about, he's with us all the time. So we don't have to pretend to be okay in front of him like we feel like we do in front of, you're in ministry. So when you go up to speak, you feel like you have to have everything together, have it perfect. Even me doing this podcast, I feel like, I was just telling my team this morning, like, I feel nervous. I feel like I don't know what to say. Like, I feel like I have to be perfect in front of the camera, but like in front of God, I don't have to be like that, and I think that's important whenever you're dealing with any type of sin, addiction, to whatever, even if it's like you're struggling with your finances, like it could be anything. Like, you don't have to act like you have it all together in front of him. Like, he gets it. And I think as soon as you understand that, it makes your relationship with him just so much easier.
Yeah.
So,
and I'd say the last thing I'd say is I've found that the more open and honest I can be with my life and my shortcomings, like even with the girls in the college that I, pour my life into, the more, obviously there's areas that if you're still working through it, you shouldn't just share it with the world necessarily. Like if there's areas that you're trying to figure out, like go to a trusted mentor or counselor. But those areas where you can just share your shortcomings and maybe even little areas that you're struggling in or failing in, it gives other people the safe space to do the same. And so now they don't feel scared to come and tell you something because they see that you're not perfect too, because none of us are. Over 50% of pastors are currently struggling with porn in ministry right now. So it's there. It's not like it's gone anywhere. People are just hiding it. So if we can, beat the enemy to the punchline where he's trying to keep us quiet, and we can be open about our story, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So the areas that God's healed or he's in the process of healing, like the more we can be vocal about it, to the point that's safe for us, that doesn't, put us in a bad space. And like, we need to do that and not hold back, because there's somebody on the other side waiting for that. And my hope, and even in this podcast, is just that somebody would hear this that is currently struggling with porn or maybe a different kind of addiction, that they go and tell somebody trusted, that they would, maybe they've never told anybody in their lives, but for the first time they would open up to somebody, go to a counselor or a mentor or a friend or whatever, and just take the first step of opening up and finding accountability, because that's the only way we can find freedom. And James, it says, confess your sins one to another, you will be healed. The forgiveness is already there. The healing comes through confession. So maybe on the other side of this, somebody can confess for the first time something that's held them in bondage for years and years, and start to find freedom for the first time.
Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of the Dare to Love podcast. I hope it blessed you and challenged you. Make sure you visit the description below for all our helpful links. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new content from us. And follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook so you can stay updated with everything we have going on. And we'll see you next week for an all-new episode